The conclusion of the third and final presidential debate in Florida between President Obama and his Republican rival, Mitt Romney. Currently, we're taking a look at the live images of the conclusion of that debate. With me for a debrief of just how the showdown played out, I'm joined on set by Douglas Herbert, our international affairs editor, and Craig Kopitas. Excuse me, Craig. So, Doug, first thoughts, who'd you give it to?
Well, if you want to go straight down the line, let's start at the basics here. This was the last chance if they wanted to change the trajectory of what's become an extremely tight race, neck and neck, according to most of the polls. This really was the last chance to do it, because you could say that the first two debates, it was 1-1. So this was the tiebreaker, so to speak. So that question, who won? Look. Hard to say who won. What we can say is that Obama went into this debate, the President of the United States, with a perceived edge, at least on issues of national security. Even if he was tied in the polls nationally, I think it's 47% now. When it comes to foreign policy, this was one area where he was perceived to be having a slight edge. And I'm not saying it was a big margin. And the question is whether he had a convincing enough performance to hold that edge, perhaps even extend it tonight. He definitely came out swinging in the very opening minutes of the debate. He referred to Mitt Romney's policies as basically his foreign policies, a throwback to the 80s. He said, all of a sudden he had mentioned al-Qaeda as one of the biggest threats, and Barack Obama jumped in there, pounced right away, and reminded him, interesting that you say right now that al-Qaeda is the biggest threat, because just a few weeks ago you were talking about Russia as being the biggest geopolitical threat. So from the very beginning, Obama tried to come out on the offensive and put Romney in a defensive posture. As a man who has, however well-intentioned, Obama is the one who has been the commander-in-chief, who's had the experience dealing with a world that is very nuanced, very complex, and not always given and lent to easy solutions. Romney said to him very pointedly at one point, it's not just about going out there and killing the terrorists, obviously an allusion to Barack Obama's trying to obviously get some political capital out of the fact that he's the one who killed bin Laden, saying you also have to go after the conditions that bring these Islamists about. You have to sort of chase them down. You have to go after them. It's not just killing them that is going to clear up this mess. Barack Obama, steady on his feet on the issues because he did know them well. He has been following, obviously, all of these for many, many years. If you want to take a more critical view, Mitt Romney, competent on the issues. Some people might say that he seemed sometimes coached and practiced on a lot of points. A lot of the talking points, especially on Syria, you might had sometimes the sound or the feel of something he had been told about again and again, points to bring up. He crammed into one sentence practically Northern Mali, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Turks, which seemed out of sort of like textbook 101, a classroom foreign policy text. When talking about this issue, these are the countries you need to get into that one phrase. But both leaders did a competent job. Obama, obviously, like I said, had a slight edge coming into this debate. It's going to be up to the spinners now to say definitively who won.
Okay, so Craig, Doug, they're mentioning Obama having entered into the debate with a slight edge. Even if you should think that he kept that edge, is that enough to actually put him in the home straight over the next 2 weeks?
I don't believe so. All Romney needed to do this evening was to look presidential and sound presidential. And I believe he accomplished that. Contrary to conventional wisdom, American foreign policy since World War II, no matter who has been in the White House, has been fairly consistent. It's the one issue where Americans either completely come together on or completely disagree on. If you go back to the Vietnam War, a lot of talk of war tonight, that was essentially a war created and fostered by Democrats with the help of Republicans. It's the Americans never seem to understand if you break it, you own it. They've done the same thing in Iraq. They said the war in Iraq was over tonight. The war in Iraq is not over. America is still paying for that war. The war in Afghanistan is not going to be over in 2014. America is going to continue paying for that war. But these are the kinds of things that the American public wants to hear. We do not have our troops there. For me, what I found most interesting about this evening is something we discussed prior to the debate. Obama continues to paint Romney as a Bushian,
and a Chainsian,
and a member of this neocon group with John Bolton and all these other fellows who got George Bush into this horrible misadventure in the Middle East. It will be interesting as we go next few days to see if Romney will embrace this neocon view or step away from it, because like the neocons or not, the one thing that Bush did is the Republican Party got the United States involved in these very costly, what they call blood and treasure misadventures in the Middle East. And the American public just doesn't want this anymore, no matter how robust that he wants to be towards Iran.
And yet, Craig, you probably will agree with this. Mitt Romney's talk tonight, he continually mentioned and brought up the theme of American leadership, that the role of America still is to lead. And Barack Obama echoed him in saying that America still remains an indispensable nation. And what's interesting here is that the military theme, despite what we've seen, despite the wars, despite the exorbitant cost of these wars which we are still paying for and will be paying for decades to come, there's still that sense of Mitt Romney emphasizing the role of strength. You need a strong America. And he emphasized the fact that what he was trying to do was cast Obama as a president who has presided over a reduction in the military strength of America, something which Obama took sharp contention with, saying, "I'm not reducing strategy, and also I'm not reducing, I'm maintaining." And there was actually a funny little exchange where Mitt Romney had accused him of actually presiding over a reduction in the number of American warships, and Barack Obama shoots back, "Well, sure, there are fewer warships now than we had in 1916 at the end of World War I, but then again, we have fewer horses and bayonets." I would personally say that might be the line of the debate. And the basic point being that we're living in a changing world, and it's not the numbers of ships, the number of missiles, the number of troops you have on the ground. It is the strategy, and it's a way of how do you refine that strategy for a more complex world where you don't have, or you're probably not going to have in the future, these lumbering giant ground wars, but rather more nimble operations in theaters of war where you have to ship very quickly.
But is this the message that's going to resound with the American public? I mean, the idea of being able to maintain military might, get less for more, which is essentially what Obama was trying to sell.
The American public has very little grasp of the strategy and tactics of the military-industrial complex. When you look at the military, you're looking at a job creator, and Romney knows this. There is a warrior class in the United States since the end of the draft in the 70s because of the Vietnam War. This is a group of individuals, men and women, who by all polls consistently vote Republican. There is, as Dwight Eisenhower coined the term, a military-industrial complex, which he was very suspicious of behind it, which is an industry that keeps people employed and keeps guns and ammo and all these little toys going into these people's hands. Now, any reduction in the military or in the toys they have is going to mean less money for these people. So how are they going to redeploy? I think Doug is correct in that you don't need 500 warships anymore when one missile will do. But what Romney is doing, and it's a neocon tactic, and this is kind of worrisome, is he's pounding that drum again. He's pounding that drum. The moment you say, let's build up the military, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the first thing that comes to your mind is, we're going to put that military on the ground somewhere.
Right.
And no one wants that anymore, least of all the military.
And what's very interesting, just feeding off of that, is there was a part of the debate where the moderator, Bob Schieffer, asked them about the future, the drones specifically. The drone policy has been an unofficially recognized and very controversial aspect of the new American method of approaching very difficult counterterrorist operations, and Mitt Romney basically came out and said that he basically supports that policy. any means, anything it takes to go after threats to America and to America's national security, especially when it's a matter of a terrorist threat. So right there, the drone is a classic example. What is it? It's an unmanned aircraft, manned from the U.S., usually thousands of miles away, which shoots missiles onto targets, often speeding across the desert in jeeps and vans, and just obliterates them right there. You don't have true boots on the ground. It's the exact opposite of boots on the ground. Some people say that as odious as this may sound on a moral level, and as many problems as you may have morally with it, it's a very effective way of waging warfare in this new age of terror threats here and there in theaters of war where it's either just politically untenable or unfeasible to get boots on the ground, or simply impossible.
Or as any military guy will tell you, the drones are very good tactically, but as every war in history has proven, without an infantry on the ground, you're really not going to win the war. You're going to continue being in a holding pattern. And that's what Romney is addressing tonight. And the way he spun it, for me, one of the other fascinating thing tonight is domestic policy is the new foreign policy, and foreign policy is the new domestic policy. It's almost an anathema in terms for them to have a debate on foreign policy when foreign and domestic policy in the United States over the past 12, 13 years have become intertwined.
Now, the economy actually cropped up several times.
More than cropped up.
Yeah, well, that's
it cropped and it was rooted
diplomatic
firmly.
way of saying it. And in fact, the moderator Bob Schäfer actually had to pull it back to the foreign policy theme, saying that we have heard this in other debates. Now, was this probably? Do you think this was always on the page as being likely to happen, or a strategy, or just
in this election, as Craig just said, yes, domestic policy and foreign policy they wind back, they circle and loop in on each other. This election has been, and this is the reason the first two debates were predominant, the first one totally, and the second debate predominantly on jobs and the economy. Let's not forget, the American public, this was a debate for the American public. It was about foreign policy, but it really wasn't for us and everyone outside the U.S. This was for a domestic audience watching a debate that is dubbed a foreign policy debate. But it's really, as we all saw, about the jobs, the manufacturing, the ability to regenerate an economy, which has been more abundant, is only now showing very, very slow signs of trying to stutter and pick up trying to pick up pace again. So yes, it was inevitable in many ways that they were going to spend a lot of time talking about the economy and talking about, especially when we were talking about China, and whether or not, Barack Obama saying that he sees China as both an adversary, but also as a potential partner in the international community, trying to play it both ways. But Americans a lot of them will hear China, the first part of that China is an adversary at this point. China, and it was very graphically depicted by Mitt Romney when he's held his hands like this. He says, China sells this much stuff to the U.S. We sell this much stuff to China. That's a very graphic image that will remain with people, and that really is the nuts and bolts of what this all boils down to. It's the trade balances. It's what it means for American jobs in an economy where, yes, it's 7.8% officially last figures unemployment, but still very high in many states, much higher than that, and where the recovery is only now starting to get underway.
Okay, thanks very much. Doug Herbert and Craig Kopitas here after Franz Wenkatz followed from Florida the final and third presidential debate. The two candidates, President Obama and Mitt Romney, are now in the home straight, just 2 weeks to go now before the November 6th election. So we'll leave it there for now, but do join us again. We'll be back on the hour with more. Take care.